Welcome to Chromatic Counsel Podcast, the podcast where law, leadership, and color collide. I'm your host, Carrie Heaps, and I have a great show lined up for you today. And today, my guest is Mason Rashtian. He is the founder of the Mason Law Firm in California. With nearly 3 decades of litigation experience, Mason has built a reputation for helping injury victims navigate some of the most challenging moments of their lives. What makes Mason's journey especially unique is that he began his legal career representing insurance companies before transitioning into plaintiff's work. That insider perspective, combined with his background in psychology and passion for understanding people, has shaped his client-centered approach to advocacy. In addition to leading a successful personal injury practice, Mason is also the host of the SCV Law and Life Podcast, where he brings legal insights and real-world conversations to professionals and community members alike. Mason, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Carrie.
I'm glad to have you here too. And we were able to talk just a few minutes. And I know we met on Instagram, actually. I think I saw a couple of things about your podcast, and I was like, oh, I'd love to have him on my program. So I'm excited that you're here with us today. But I would love for you to just kind of take us back to the beginning for any listeners that don't, really know you, or they're just now getting to know you. What first inspired you to pursue a career in law, first and foremost? And when did you know it was the right path for you?
So ever since I was a kid, I like to take care of people.
Mhm.
Being the eldest of three boys, uh, you know, I lost my parents for better sake. It's too complicated to explain, but I haven't seen my dad since I was 10 years old.
Mm,
So I became the head of the house when I was 10 years old, just short of 11 years old.
mm,
And being the oldest child, I kind of took on the responsibility of the family. So ever since then, it's been one of those things that I like to take care of people. So it
mhm,
was a natural thing for me to go to study psychology first and then venture on to doing the law.
mm.
Um, so that's what I like to do. That's my passion. Whether it's good or bad, it helps a lot with what my clients, I have empathy for them. I know what they are going through. And I think that helps me as an individual and as a litigator.
Absolutely. And I think it's super important, um, regardless of the type of law somebody practices, to have a certain amount of empathy because even though like a tax attorney, if they're representing somebody for, in front of the Internal Revenue or,
Mhm.
like what you do, for personal injury or someone else who's going through a divorce, that it might be that lawyer's 20th client that they've had in 6 months, but it's the first time it's happening to the
Right.
person that you're representing.
Yeah. When I first opened my own practice 20 years ago, I had to get some money coming in. So I also did some family law.
Mhm,
And it was very difficult for me because I would get involved,
mhm,
not a good thing, but emotionally in their journey as and what they were going through and wanted to make sure the kids were being taken care of. So it was very hard for me to do family law in that instance. That's why I I only did it for 3 years
yeah.
and made sure now I just do personal injury only.
And that kind of leads me into my next question for you because, like I mentioned in your bio, you earned your undergraduate degree in psychology before becoming an attorney. How has that understanding of human behavior really helped you in both the courtroom and in working with clients, but also too with you being able to represent them and not absorb a lot of it emotionally? I'm sure you have had to really learn how to do that as well.
Yeah, it's taken a long time, but I think I'm finally up to a point where if I need to put a wall up to make sure I don't get emotionally too involved in my clients' injuries and journeys and their life, I can do that.
Mhm,
And as far as the psychology goes, it really helped me to figure out how to look at somebody and to talk to them in their own level, meaning what they're comfortable with, right?
mhm,
Some clients really want to be handheld throughout the entire journey of us representing them,
mhm,
and some clients don't. It depends on their personality, and I think that's helped me to be able to figure out how to best communicate with them and make sure I represent them the way they want to be represented.
Absolutely. Now you started your career on the flip side of this because you were representing the insurance companies. So what lessons from the defense side have you given or really are to your advantage when you're advocating for injured clients today?
So the way it's helped me is I'm very objective as to when a case comes in.
Hmm.
I see the good and I see the bad.
Hmm.
And I always talk to my clients about what's good about their case and what's going to be the pitfalls about their case. Sometimes to a point where clients will tell me, well, you sound like a defense attorney. Well, my job isn't just to be able to tell you what's good about your case. It's not going to help you if you don't know what the pitfalls are, right? I'm supposed to tell you this is what's going to happen at trial. This is what they're going to argue. So you can be prepared for it.
Hmm.
And if I don't do that, I'm not doing my job as an attorney because I'm also a counselor. That's what we call ourselves counselors, not just attorneys. So it really helps me to be objective as to what uh, is the good and the bad and be able to tell my clients, this is what's going to be good for you and what's going to be bad for you. But you get to decide at the end of the day based on what I tell you, because now you can have an informed decision of what to make. The
Hmm.
other thing that's helped me with, I know where defense attorneys are going from a
Hmm.
defense standpoint, right? So I know what their arguments are before they even formulate it a lot of times. And I can speak their language, which is a
Hmm.
lot easier. So when I talk to a defense attorney, I'm not one of those guys who just pounds his chest and says, give me $1 million because if not, we're going to go with this and that. No, I understand where they're coming from. I
Hmm.
can speak on their basis, and that helps a lot to resolve cases if we need to.
And that kind of leads me into another question about this because I actually had yesterday on the podcast, I did an interview. It hasn't gone live yet, but Patrick Russell, who's a top mediator here in Florida, former trial attorney turned mediator. And we were actually talking about this. And I'm curious, like, do you find that, like, with your skill set, do you have many things that go to mediation and settle? Or are you finding a lot of them wind up having to go to trial, or is it just a mix?
Yeah, it's just a mix. And, I also do some mediation work for the LA County Courts over here as a
Hmm.
settlement officer. Um, it's a lot better for a client if we have
Hmm.
a chance to settle the case instead of going to trial
Hmm.
because trials have become so expensive. So unless you have a really big case with a lot of numbers to put in front of a jury
Hmm.
and a good, uh, you know, a really good client to go in front of a jury, it's really hard for them to make out what they think they should get.
Hmm.
Okay. For example, if I go to trial, a treating doctor is going to charge between five and $10,000 just to show up at trial. That's for just one treating doctor. So if you have multiple ones, and then you get an accident reconstruction, a biomechanic, you're looking at 40 or $50,000 to go to trial, right?
Hmm.
So a case that's not a six-figure case, and we talk about a few $100,000, that's going to eat up into the client's money. And that's
Yeah.
one thing they have to understand is sometimes it's better to control your own outcome and to know
Hmm.
what you're going to get than go in front of 12 different strangers who are just there because they don't have a choice to get that $5 or $10 a day to be there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's like they're not going to be happy to be in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you can control what you do, it's a much better outcome for you. You may not get what you want at the end of the day, but guess what? You know what you're getting. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the issue.
And it was so funny. That's even what Patrick was saying. He said, do you like one of the things he would say in mediation would be, think in terms of if you don't take this offer and we go to trial, how are you going to feel if what you're awarded is nowhere near what the offer is? Because you have six people that really their only qualification at the end of the day to be there is that they have a valid driver's license, in Florida. So I was glad that you kind of shared that.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this, because obviously, even for the people who are tuning in that are non-attorneys, because we have quite a few that tune into the show as well, but what's one mistake that you see people make after an accident happens that can hurt their case before they even speak with an attorney? And I think I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to see if I'm
Well,
right.
there's a few of them. Number one is when you talk to an insurance company, the adjuster always wants to take your statement. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to know what you say and what not to say to an adjuster before you talk to an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
right? I always tell clients that when they sign up with us, if you want to talk to the adjuster to set up your car rental, car repairs, that's perfectly fine. But never ever talk about your injuries. Because when you talk to an adjuster, especially before you talk to an attorney, they will always ask you questions like, so how are you feeling today? Blah, 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 stuff like that, that later on can work against you.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk to an adjuster, before you talk to an attorney, never talk to them about how you hurt. If they ask you, just say, you know what, I'm not feeling well. Before, I don't want to talk about my injuries until I see my doctor or a healthcare provider,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what's going to get you into trouble a lot of times. The
Yeah,
other issues are, if you wait too long to see a doctor,
that's what I was going to say.
they
Waiting too long.
always. I could tell you, yeah, but it's one of those things you can see a doctor or before or after you see an attorney. That's it depends on when you talk to an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
But usually you want to see a doctor as soon as you can, even if you feel fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the other issue people get themselves into trouble is talking to the adjuster without talking to an attorney first and
Mm-hmm.
talking about their injury or non-injury at the time.
Yeah. And the reason I said waiting too long, and I think this is personal experience, because I think everybody has gone through that where they've had a bad, well, maybe not everybody, but if you've had a bad car wreck, and I have in the past, many years ago, and I remember I was super sore, and they even said, you really should go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Well, 2 days later, a friend of mine's like, you really need to go to the doctor. There's something wrong. And I was really glad that I did. But I didn't want to have to call an attorney. I felt the insurance company made me feel awful about it because at the time, the person who hit me had the same insurance company. It was the same carrier. And as
Mhm.
soon as they found that out, they're like, oh, we're not paying for your rental car anymore. We're not going to do this. We're not. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? And they're like, that's not our problem. And that's what made me pick up the phone to call an attorney.
Wow.
So,
Yes. Yes. Sometimes you get adjusters who are very aggressive,
yeah.
but sometimes you get them on the other side. They're overly friendly
Hmm.
in the beginning because they want to give you that false sense of security.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to the property damage, if the liability is clear, they usually don't fight it.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the injury portion of it, is the whole different story. They'll say, well, we don't think you're really injured, or it's only soft tissue.
Hmm.
Uh, you didn't see a doctor right away. You didn't go to use an ambulance. You didn't go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's one of those things that I tell clients, if you are in an accident, yeah, you can take the ibuprofen, you can take pain medication. That's going to help your pain go away.
Hmm.
But if your spine is out of alignment, if you have other underlying conditions, that's not going to fix it, plain and simple. And it's going to
Yeah.
turn into a long-term issue later on.
And I can attest to that because I had migraines afterwards for many, many, many years, just because of what happened with with the way I was hit and so forth. So yeah, I would say anybody who's listening, and I do, and sometimes they just make you feel so bad. And I remember telling the attorney that I called, I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I feel really bad about this. And she goes, unfortunately, sometimes this is just the way that it works.
Mhm.
Now let me handle it. You focus on getting better and doing what you need to do, and we're going to get this resolved. And she did. She got it resolved before, I think it was like 6 months in. We were
Yeah.
done. And
Y- And I can tell you, we get all sorts of clients. Some clients will call and say, I don't really want to sue anybody. I don't want to make anybody feel bad. I feel guilty for doing this. That's one spectrum. And then the other spectrum is, oh, I'm going to go after for everything they've got. So
yeah.
you have to be able to manage both expectations and explain to one, hey, you're not really going after the person. That's what insurance is for. All we're here to help you get your treatment, get you well, get you back where you're supposed to be, and that's fine. And the other hand, and say, look, accidents happen. People are not trying to hurt people intentionally. It's
Hmm.
just crap happens in life.
Hmm.
So let's bring down the noise a little bit. Let's get you what you're supposed to be, and we'll go from there. So yeah,
Yeah.
we get all sorts.
And obviously, you've handled a lot of these cases over the years. Is there one in particular that really kind of affected you, either professionally or personally, that just sticks with you to this day?
Every time we get um, a case involving a minor child, it always hurts. I mean, I've had cases where we just resolved a case on a dog bite for a 4-year-old
Oh, wow.
who was attacked by a dog, and the pictures look really bad. And poor kid now is afraid of dogs, right? We had another kid who fell into an open fire pit and burned a good part of his body under third-degree burns.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just him, he was 6 years at the time, but his 4-year-old sister watched the whole thing.
Oh,
So
no.
every time when you have a small child being a father, it kind of it really gets to you. You really want to protect that child more than anything else.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that stick with you more than anything else.
Yeah, I can only imagine, especially when you have them in the office or you go to see them at the hospital, that's got to be almost heartbreaking.
We had when I first opened my office, there was another dog bite case when a pit bull went after this kid who was doing nothing wrong, was just playing in middle of the yard. And that kid, oh my God, yeah, I saw him at the hospital. It was so bad. The pit bull had taken the scalp off of this kid. It was
Oh
bad.
my gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh no. Yeah, those seem to be the worst, and seems to be we see more of those across the United States, more and more dog bites and aggressive animals. So
yeah.
I just hate that. Well, we are going to be right back with Mason, and next we are going to be talking about his podcast right after this message.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Bodies Don't Lie trial presence and jury intelligence system. As courtrooms move online, the challenges of legal advocacy remain. Attorneys now navigate virtual hearings, mediations, and depositions on platforms like Zoom, facing new screens but familiar faces. Clients still feel anxiety. Witnesses still express emotion. Opposing counsel communicates just as powerfully through posture, facial expressions, voice, and behaviors, even when separated by pixels. The Bodies Don't Lie system is designed for this virtual landscape. It teaches attorneys to heighten their observational intelligence, to read nonverbal cues, apply facial mapping, and leverage strategic color for stronger communication and persuasive presence. Because the screen may have changed, but the human element hasn't. Discover how Bodies Don't Lie transforms your virtual trial presence. Learn more about the system and empower your practice today. And now let's get back to today's conversation.
And we are back and we are talking with Mason Rashtian. And he just recently started a podcast. I'm going to have you talk a little bit about that if you don't mind, Mason. What is the podcast and what made you start it?
So I started my podcast in September of last year. It's called the SCV Law Life Podcast. I've had 28 episodes up to now. And it really started when I actually went on somebody else's podcast
Mhm.
in the beginning, about a year ago in June of last year. And, we did the podcast and afterwards we discussed and they said, hey, look, if you want to do it, we can help you. We can help you coach being a podcaster. And in all honesty, in the beginning, it's terrifying because you're not used to being in front of a camera.
Mhm.
And I remember having a social media person come to my office to just do the simplest 30-second commercials, and I really hated it. It really stressed me out. But doing the podcasts has been very liberating for me
Mhm.
because after a while, you get to a point you actually enjoy it. You talk to people, you learn what they do, you learn
Mhm.
stuff that you didn't know. I learned a
Yeah.
lot of stuff from my fellow attorneys don't do what I do. People who do estate planning. I've learned a lot from them.
Mhm.
Get a sense of connection with them. So it's a great way to meet people, to network, build your practice. So that's what I've been doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And definitely, I always encourage attorneys. I'm like, if you have thought about having a podcast, you should do it. I mean, and it's a great way too, I think, for them to kind of educate the public about what you do and to share information. And of course, if you're interviewing other attorneys, which I imagine you're doing too, has that kind of influenced the way that you're running your practice now? Has having the podcast changed how you're doing business?
Uh, in some ways, yeah, because depending on who's a guests, right?
Hmm.
So not only from attorney's standpoint, we have other people who work in the business of marketing,
Hmm.
and I've learned stuff from them on how to manage my own firm, right? So
Yeah.
that's helped in a lot of ways. Obviously, it takes some time away from my, what I do as an attorney, but I make sure that nothing's falling behind. I still,
Hmm.
put everything. Uh, as far as organization goes. I was watching a podcast earlier and they were talking about the CRM.
Hmm.
We make sure our CRM's up to point, make sure everything's up and up. So
Hmm.
it has, yes, in some ways.
Yeah.
And it helps to communicate with the clients better
Yeah.
now.
Oh, I can imagine. And for any attorneys that are listening that are kind of like maybe on the fence about starting their own podcast, do you have like a word of advice or a few tips that you would offer to them in the beginning that you wish somebody else would have shared with you or that you wish you would have implemented early on?
Well, one thing I did learn from very on in the beginning was just do it. Number one, it's
Yeah.
going to be trick in the first couple of episodes. It's going to be you're gonna be nervous. I remember the first one I did. I was sweating and I had my jacket on, I had a tie on, but
Oh,
you learn to relax. You don't need to be dressed up all the time. You don't have to have a camera in front of you. You just get in
yeah.
there to talk to people more than anything else. Just do it. And be mindful that you're not gonna be seen by a million people,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Hmm.
And that helps. Knowing that, yeah, some people are going to see your podcast, which is great, but you're not going to be in front of a million people. And that I think helps kind of calm the nerves down. And then you just learn to talk,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. And as you know, the show is called Chromatic Counsel. So I always like to ask my guest a question about body language or about color. And my question for you, because you have a background in psychology, when you're meeting a new client, or maybe you're in court or taking a deposition, are there any body language cues that you really pay attention to, like constantly, whenever you're assessing credibility or trying to build rapport?
Yeah. One of the things is, when you ask them a question, how they're responding.
Mhm.
If it's a short answer, if they're getting into it, you can see where their eyes are going. You can see if they're relaxed in their body or if they have their hands crossed. Oops.
Mhm.
If they're knocking things over, obviously. Right. So you can gauge if somebody is nervous or not,
Mhm.
and whether they're being you know antagonistic from the very beginning or not. You
Mhm.
can see that in court. You can see it from interviewing somebody in your office or from even on Zoom.
Mhm.
It depends how they're sitting, how they're posturing themselves. You can learn a lot from that. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you're right. And just like even before we had tech issues and I'm like, you couldn't see me because I was all blurred out, but it was like you just feel so stressed out and kind of what's going on, you know. So thank you for sharing that. And also too, do you have a like if you do go to court, do you have like a go-to wardrobe piece, like a certain color suit, or do you try to mix it up, or does it, do you put much thought into that part of it with
I,
color?
I like dark colors,
Mhm.
like black especially. That's my favorite color because it shows power to me. It's
Yeah.
mysterious. Uh, so to me, that's what I usually like to dress like with my dark suit, my black suit, and sometimes a white shirt. But it's nowadays it's more of a light blue shirt that I like to wear with like a red tie.
Mhm.
That kind of that for me that stands out the most.
Yeah, that's a nice combination. I love
Yeah.
that. And my last question here. So, for attorneys who are listening in and they're early on in their careers, they're just starting out, what advice would you give them about building trust, credibility, long-term success in the legal profession?
N- So things have changed so much since I first started. I was talking to an attorney earlier on today. it seems like the younger attorneys now, not all, but some of them don't consider this as a career. It's more of a
Mhm.
9 to 5 job. So my first advice would be is learn as much as you can about the law. Be passionate about it, right? This is your career. Learn what it is to be not just a litigator, but a communicator,
Mhm.
right? You want to and be yourself, be true to yourself. So don't try to be somebody else that you're not.
Mhm.
But more than anything else, learn the practice. Learn how it is to manage a case, how it is to talk to opposing side, how it is to be in front of a judge.
Mhm.
Uh, because again, it's things have changed so much. I don't know how that is in Florida, but in out here in California, since the pandemic, everything's done online now, even with judges. So we don't physically go to court as much as we used to. Everything is
Mhm.
done remotely. It's changed a lot from where we were when you would dress up, go in front of a judge, stand there. It's a different mindset.
You're
And
right. And
be respectful with everybody else.
yeah.
You know?
I think that's a huge thing nowadays too. But you're right. Everything is, there's so many more things that are online. And here in Florida, there's still quite a bit going on in person, but it is getting to a point now just to keep up with the pace that so many things are happening virtually, whether it's a pretrial conference or a deposition or mediation or even the full trial, just depending upon what it is. But it's still, everything still applies. Just because you're on Zoom does not mean I do so much research for my CLEs, especially because I teach
Mhm.
on body language and color. And I actually pulled, and I think it was a case from Ohio. And it was something with, I think it was an appellate thing, but the judge pointed out to one of the attorneys, he was in his office and he had on a really nice shirt and he had his tie on, but he didn't have a jacket on, and everybody else did. And he's like, you need to, where's your jacket? He's like, you need to go get it, put it on. This is no different than if you were appearing before me. So they waited a minute or two so he could go grab his jacket and put it on. And, again, it's just everything still applies. It's not going to be any different. You can still get sanctioned on Zoom.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, respect the law.
Yeah.
Respect what you do. Respect that you're an attorney, you're an officer of the court, and act accordingly,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. And one other quick question for you about that. So, even the attorneys who are working at a big firm, and they're, because you've had your own firm for a while, obviously, but if they're thinking about, hey, I'd love to go out on my own and, step away from big law or step away from the firm I'm working with, what advice would you give to those attorneys that want to go out on their own?
Man, I remember before I went on my own, I talked to as many attorneys who did that before I left the firm to do this on myself.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if things have changed or not as much as they used to, because when I first opened my office 20 years ago, you every nothing was online, right? You
Hmm.
still clients would come in. Now since the pandemic, almost everything's done with even with our client virtually.
Hmm.
Uh, but make sure you have the practices in place to run your firm the way you want to. What I mean is, again, back then there were no CRMs. Make sure now you have a CRM, so you keep
Hmm.
your calendar and everything in order.
Hmm.
Make sure you're as organized as you can, and honestly, still be out there and meet people. When I first opened my office, I went to as many events as I could.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about chamber events, networking events, because it's so hard to start your practice and you want to be able to meet as many people as you can, build as much organizational skills as you can,
Hmm.
be, your networking group. And that becomes really important. That's probably the number one thing, because it's hard when you first start. You got to get money coming in. But
Hmm.
so that's probably the number one thing.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because I find too a lot of attorneys don't seem that, I guess no one's really taught that in law school, that you are going out and networking and promoting yourself and what you're doing. And I think for some, if you've never had to do it before, it can probably be very intimidating and tough and not easy to do. So I love
Yeah.
that you shared that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
know we're in the world of, Instagrams and Facebook and TikTok and all that stuff. Nowadays, you need to do that, but also be able to network in person, because that personal touch will never go away.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. And Mason, it's been a pleasure having you on the program today. And I hope you can come back in the future and talk with us again. But just in closing, because I do have a link in the show notes for people to go to your site and to go to learn more about the podcast and listen to that. But do you have anything coming up that you'd like to share with everyone? In closing?
No, I mean, I still have my podcast once in a while. I had one this morning. I have another podcast episode coming up next week. But aside from that, no, I mean, but thank you for having me. If anyone wants to check out the website, it's mrscvlaw.com. Just my initials, SCV Law, which is Santa Clarita Valley where I live, and that's it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, we appreciate you being on the program today and sharing such great insight for everyone. So we just love what you shared. And if you like what Mason shared and it resonated with you, I hope you'll click the like button and click subscribe so you know when we drop our next episode of Chromatic Counsel. And I hope you can tune in next time. And as always, I am wishing you continued success.